is still one big unanswered question hanging over the Idaho murder case, and that is why. If Bryan Kohberger really is the killer, why? Why did he do it? Right now, it appears there is only one person in the world who knows the answer, and Kohberger ain't talking. But there might be a way for the rest of us to retrace the steps that led him into that cold Moscow jail cell. A series of posts that were found online, some of them really disturbing, just might have been written by Kohberger when he was a teenager. Here's an example from 2011 when he was 16. It reads, "I see a large intensity of black, yellow, white fuzz. It makes my mind fizzle, and I can barely keep in the bounds of reality. It is as if the ringing in my ears and the fuzz in my vision is simply all of the demons in my head mocking me." Dozens and dozens of posts like this were written on a site called Tapatalk, in a forum for people who believed that they were suffering from a condition called visual snow syndrome. NewsNation has not been able to independently verify that these are Kohberger's early posts, but there are strong indications that they are. And I'm joined now by the two people who found them. Lauren Matthias is a reporter who's been following this case very closely, and John Matthias, her husband, is a clinical and forensic psychologist who's done a deep dive into what the posts might mean. Together, they host the Hidden True Crime podcast. And welcome to both of you. Lauren, how did you make this discovery, and how did you link it to Bryan Kohberger?
Yeah, it was the Hidden True Crime team that did this together, and there was a verified email address that we used that uncovered these writings from 2011. The post, the photo looks to be a side-by-side of Bryan. The username is an email that he used, as well as his rapper name. He did some raps online, and he confirms his own birthday and a relative's address, as well as living in Pennsylvania. So things do seem to add up, as well as the hundreds of pages that we have poured over reading. Everything matches up to look like this is Bryan Kohberger writing as a 16-year-old boy.
And there's like an array of writings. You say hundreds and hundreds of pages. That's just remarkable to start with from a teenager. But this went from 2009 to 2012, I think ages 14 to 17, John. And just sort of your overall impressions of the body of work as you went through it.
I think there's a couple pieces here that are most relevant. There's a couple pages that really kind of speak to his mental state at the time. But I think the overall picture that emerges here is this is a very troubled adolescent with many mental health issues. In fact, there's so many symptoms that he identifies, it's hard to know where to start.
I mean, it's sad and scary, sort of all at the same time, to hear that, because you think of a teenager suffering, but then you think of the person we're talking about, and it's hard to feel any sympathy at all if he's indeed the killer. Lauren, in 2009, the posts were pretty short. But then in 2010, they start to get longer. They're more confessional. They don't talk so much about his visual snow condition, whereas, it's a physiological situation where you see, a snowy outlook on life, basically. But these ones were more about his childhood and his life. Let me read this one. "I can't remember anything recent or anything from childhood. Now I am just a blank soul living in the now. My mind is never not on visual snow, and I always wonder what a normal person would be doing while I sit there and suffer. This whole thing has made me crazy. I feel like my life is pointless because people can think about times with parents, childhood, memories, and be happy, and I won't be able to." Do we know, Lauren, if he ever got any help for this, if he saw a doctor, if anybody reached out to him and, tried to treat him?
We don't know what medical help he got. We do see that on these posts throughout these years, he tries different diets. He works really hard to try an array of diets, which actually confirms what a relative and friends have said about him being a very strict vegan or strict eater. It seems that he thinks that's the cause of what is called visual snow. And I think that, but again, it goes further than these physical symptoms, which is why I had to, take this to my husband, Dr. John Matthias, because it talks, as you mentioned, about demons. It talks about him feeling like a criminal in one point, yet he doesn't have a record. And that's why I said, John, you've got to look at these. What do these mean? This can't all be health issues, right?
Well, one of them, Let's talk about that, John. In 2011, he's sort of latching onto this toxin theory. He says, I'm going to talk to a good neurologist about this, one that is very open-minded. I think this really is the cause. It might be the arteries being inflamed. It could hurt very bad. This seriously could be an issue that's undiagnosed. And then he goes on in 2011 and starts to tell people how to treat themselves. Like he starts kind of telling other users what they need to do for their problems. And here's what he says. Visual snow is caused by toxins in our body. These toxins range from yeast overgrowth all the way to fungus. I believe I caused my visual snow by too much toxins from the sweetener I used, and also too much caffeine chemicals. I also lived in a moldy house. When something is happening in your brain that shouldn't, chemicals are being released that shouldn't. These chemicals are released because we have toxins that our body doesn't want. It is going haywire. John, do we know if this might have been the start of him becoming a vegan to try to treat himself? Because it certainly looks like he's telling everybody to, eat plant-based diets and fruit juices to heal themselves.
It does seem like he became vegan around that time. This is also a time that's consistent with him losing a significant amount of weight. One point I want to make, though, about the visual snow is that, to me, one of the issues here is that he wants to attribute all of his problems and all of his mental health problems to the visual snow, right? And that's a big question mark about whether is the visual snow causing the mental illness, or is it the other way around? Is it the mental illness that's contributing to physical and somatic symptoms? Psychologists call that somatization. So I think it's a stretch to go from visual snow to the things he's talking about, the screams, the demons, right? Those are in the moral domain. Those are not in the medical domain. So he's taking some of these medical issues and he's trying to force them into this mental illness box, I think, to some degree, when in fact we're probably talking about something that has more to do with values and is more about moral judgments, like being a criminal, than it is about medical issues.
And this one last line, he says, I feel like coming to terms could be a bad thing. It's ominous. Excellent work, both of you, Lauren Matthias and John Matthias. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.